You're watching the Everything Network. The Rizzuto crime family is an organized crime family based in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, whose criminal activity covers most of southern Quebec and Ontario. The United States Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, considers the family a faction of the Bonanno crime family, while Canadian and most other international law enforcement agencies recognize it as an independent crime family. The Rizzuto family is sometimes referred to as the Sixth Family. Niccolo Rizzuto, a Sicilian immigrant from Cattolica Eraclea, established the organization in the 1970s as part of the Sicilian faction of the Montreal Catroni crime family. An internal war broke out by the late 1970s, which resulted in the death of acting captain Paolo Violi and his brothers, allowing the Rizzutos to overtake the Catronis as the preeminent crime family in Montreal. Niccolo quickly rose through the ranks of organized crime in Montreal, earning the nickname the Canadian Godfather and Boss of the Mafia in Canada from international organized crime expert Antonio Nicasso. Niccolo's son Vito Rizzuto was indicted in 2004 and imprisoned from 2007 until 2012 for murders in which he participated in 1981, causing a power struggle among criminals in Montreal. During Vito's imprisonment, his son Niccolo Jr. was killed in 2009, and Niccolo Sr. was shot by a sniper while in his home in 2010. Upon Vito's release, several people were killed in what was suspected to be retaliation for the murders of his family. Vito died of natural causes in 2013, and the head of the mafia in Montreal is now assumed to be his son, Leonardo. In the 1970s, Rizzuto was an underling in the Sicilian faction, led by Luigi Greco until his death in 1972, of the Calabrian Catroni crime family. As tension then grew into a power struggle between the Calabrian and Sicilian factions of the family, a mob war began in 1976. In December 1970, the Reggio Bar, which served as the office of the Catroni family underboss, Paolo Violi, was bugged by an undercover policeman, Robert Menard, who for the next 5 years recorded everything that Violi said in the Reggio Bar. In 1975-1976, Menard's recordings were played in public at the SICO hearings, which ruined Violi's underworld reputation. The Bonanno family, which the Catroni family was only a branch of, shifted its support from Violi to Rizzuto in the aftermath of the SICO hearings. Vito Rizzuto went to New York to meet the Commission, the governing board of the American Mafia, and asked for their approval to have Violi killed, as he argued that Violi was simply too stupid to be the next boss of the Catroni family, as proven by l'affaire Menard. The Commission, which was very unhappy with Violi following the SICO hearings, gave their permission for Rizzuto to have Violi killed along with his followers. However, the Commission did not give its approval for the murder of either Vic or Frank Catroni. The first victim of the gang war was Pietro Sciarra, a Rizzuto loyalist who joined Violi's faction. Sciarra was killed on February 14, 1976, as he was leaving a cinema after watching The Godfather Part 2, dubbed into Italian. In 1977, Rizzuto and Catroni Capodicina Paolo Violi met face-to-face in the home of a Montreal resident for a last-ditch effort to resolve their differences, according to a police report. But the peace talks failed, and most of the Rizzuto family fled to Venezuela. This led to a violent mafia war in Montreal, which resulted in the deaths of Violi and his brothers, along with others, spanning the mid-1970s to the early 1980s until the war ceased. Antonio Manno's son Domenico was also instrumental in Violi's murder. He received a 7-year sentence after pleading guilty to conspiring to kill Violi. Rizzuto confidant Agostino Contrera received a 5-year sentence in relation to Violi's murder. By the mid-1980s, the Rizzuto crime family emerged as Montreal's preeminent crime family after the Turf War. The Rizzuto family, along with their allies in the Contrera Caruana clan, were major players in the economy of Venezuela via their holding company of Aceros Prensados, which owned much real estate, ranches, trucking companies, factories, hotels, shipping, service providers, and building contractors, whose assets in Venezuela in the 1980s were worth $500 million. Niccolo's son, Vito, later followed him into the mafia. He kept a low profile, working only with trusted people close to the family. They worked with the Contreras Caruana Mafia clan, Colombian and Venezuelan drug cartels, and the Bonanno crime family in New York City. Gerlando Sciascia was a Bonanno captain that served as a representative for the Rizzutos. Rizzuto was the mediator who oversaw the peace among the Hells Angels, the mafia, street gangs, Colombian cartels, and the Irish mobs such as the West End Gang. The Rizzuto family lived in a mafia village along a section of Gowen Boulevard, where most of the imposing Tudor-style mansions were owned by mafiosi. The Rizzuto family and their allies in the Contreras Caruana clan were more cosmopolitan than the Cotroni family, as Peter Edwards, the crime correspondent of the Toronto Star, noted they lived on a grandiose international scale, driving BMWs and Mercedes-Benzes 500 class, and also owning English country mansions with names such as Broomfield Manor and The Hook. Their children kept away from the old neighborhood and attended well-heeled private schools such as Selwyn House, with the offspring of more mainstream capitalists. In the 1980s, Vito's French-Canadian right-hand man, Reynald Desjardins, along with Gerald Hiscock and Michel Routhier, were involved in smuggling drugs via Newfoundland. Taking advantage of the high unemployment rate in the Newfoundland fishing industry, the Rizzuto family employed the fishermen to use their boats to smuggle drugs from Turkey into Montreal, with the fishermen being paid between $17,000 and $25,000 per voyage. In October 1987, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police seized one fishing boat, the Charlotte Louise, that was carrying 17 tons of Turkish hashish. Vito Rizzuto, Desjardins, Hiscock, and Routhier were all charged with conspiracy to smuggle drugs, but the judge at the trial excluded much of the wiretap evidence. The trial ended in an acquittal for all of the accused on November 8, 1990. In 1995, a document from the Service de Police de la Ville de Montréal stated, if sold on the street, the cocaine, hashish, marijuana, and heroin seized in Canada in 1993 alone would have earned criminals between $1.5 and $4 billion. Amounts seized correspond to about 10% of imports. The same document estimated that Quebec organized crime groups made profits of $30 billion in 1993, with the Mafia and the Hells Angels taking the largest share. Between 1988 and 1995, Quebec-based organized crime groups were responsible for 90% of all the cocaine and hashish seized in Canada. By 2003, the Rizzuto organization was variously listed in FBI and DEA files as merely the Canadian crew of the Bonanno family or the Montreal faction of the Bonannos. The reality is far different. The territory under its control is huge. More than 1 million square miles of Quebec and Ontario directly fall under its influence, an area larger than 1/4 the size of the entire United States. It includes major cities, the busiest border crossings between the US and Canada, and many mature mafia clans that are, by and large, cooperating under the Sixth Family's banner. Where American mafia bosses controlled criminal activity in portions of a city or a New York borough, or the criminal activity in an industrial or commercial sector, such as construction or New York's garment district, the Sixth Family was an enterprise with a true global reach. The Sixth Family had outpaced any crew in the Bonanno family, and indeed, man for man, dollar for dollar, had eclipsed the family as a whole. The nucleus of the Montreal-based Sicilian Mafia comprises of hundreds of soldiers and associates, says a Canadian police report back in 2004. Those who merely do business with the Sixth Family or work with them in short-term ventures are not included in this. Neither, generally, are the businessmen who do mostly non-criminal favors for the organization. In 1996, The firm of Olifus Marketing Group, OMG, was founded in Vaughan by Salvatore Olivetti, a recycling garbage company. Two of the men on OMG's board of directors had mafia associations. Giancarlo Serpe had been a business partner of Ennio Mora. Another board member, Frank Campoli, was the first cousin to Giovanni Rizzuto, the wife of Vito Rizzuto, and was a guest at the wedding in 1995 of Nick Rizzuto Jr. Giovanni Rizzuto and her three adult children, namely Nick Rizzuto, Leonardo Rizzuto, and Libertina Rizzuto, collectively owned shares worth $1.6 million in OMG. In 1997, OMG won its first contract for recycling with the city of Etobicoke just before Etobicoke was merged into Toronto. OMG then took the recycling contract for all of Toronto. OMG enjoyed massive success, winning contracts for recycling with the cities of Ottawa, Markham, London, Hamilton, Windsor and St. Catharines as well, with numerous school boards and universities across Ontario. On May 30, 2002, Vito Rizzuto was arrested for drunk driving in a blue Grand Cherokee Jeep that belonged to OMG. An investigation by journalists from La Presse revealed that Rizzuto had no official role, with OMG routinely drove OMG vehicles, such as the Jeep. In February 2010, an audit by the Canada Revenue Agency revealed that Rizzuto's wife and children were major shareholders in OMG, leading to the Rizzutos to sell their share to Olivetti, despite his claims not to know who the Rizzutos were. After consolidation of their power in the 1990s, the Rizzutos became overexposed and overextended. The first major blow to the family was the murder of their Toronto agent Gaetano Panepinto by the 'Ndrangheta hitman Salvatore Carlotti on October 3, 2000. Though the murder had been sanctioned by Rizzuto, who withdrew his protection of Panepinto, meaning that Panepinto could be killed without fear of revenge by the Rizzuto family, the fact that the family had not taken action themselves against Panepinto for unsanctioned murders damaged its image in the underworld. The journalists Peter Edwards and Antonio Nicasso wrote, "The murder marked a rare lapse in Vito's judgment and a subtle turning point in his fortunes. It would have been far better to take action himself against Panepinto if he needed to sacrifice his lieutenant." By bending to the pressure of the Italian team that visited him, Vito had further legitimized the 'Ndrangheta on the streets and undermined his own security. Panepinto was replaced as the family's Toronto agent by Juan Ramon Fernandez, a Spanish gangster who'd been a family associate since the 1980s. In January 2001, Rizzuto called a meeting at a Toronto restaurant attended by members of the Gambino family of New York, the Magadino family of Buffalo, and the 7 Ndrangheta clans of Toronto to discuss his plans to complete his takeover of the underworld in Ontario. Vito Rizzuto was arrested on January 20, 2004, in Montreal, for his involvement in the May 5, 1981, gangland killings of 3 rival Bonanno crime family captains, Alphonse Indelicato, Philip Giacconi, and Dominic Trinchera, and was sentenced to a 10-year prison sentence on May 4, 2007, after being extradited to the United States. After Rizzuto was arrested in 2004, a committee of caretaker leaders for Vito Rizzuto was formed of Niccolo Rizzuto, Paolo Renda, Rocco Solicito, Francesco Arcadi, Lorenzo Giordano, and Francesco Del Balso. On February 11, 2005, the Direzione Investigativa Antimafia, DIA, arrested Giuseppe Zappia, an Italian engineer at his luxury villa outside of Rome, on charges of fraud in connection with his efforts to win the contract to build a bridge to connect Sicily to Calabria on behalf of the Rizzuto family. Zappia was infamous in Canada, as his firm Le Terrasse Zarolega had been awarded the contract without tender to build the Olympic Village for the 1976 Olympics, at the express wish of Montreal Mayor Jean Drapeau. The Olympic Village that Le Terrasse Zarolega built cost the city of Montreal $100 million, which was 3 times the cost projected, and Zappia ended up facing 27 counts of fraud, extortion, and paying bribes in connection with the Olympic Village fiasco, Zappia returned to Italy and became a billionaire by construction projects in the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Libya, though there were complaints about cost overruns in his Middle Eastern projects. Despite this inauspicious history, Zappia was a friend of Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi, and he was favoured to win the contract to build the bridge over Strait of Messina. As part of the same investigation, Italy filed an extradition request with Canada for Vito Rizzuto to send to Italy to face charges of fraud and money laundering. Likewise, as part of the same investigation, Italy had also filed an extradition request with the United Kingdom for Sivalingam Sivabhavanandan, a Sri Lankan businessman living in London, with France for Hakim Hamoudi of Paris, who was accused of being the messenger between Zappia and Rizzuto, and with Canada for the extradition of Filippo Ranieri, a building manager in Montreal and a Rizzuto family member. Sivabhavanandan was arrested while on visit to France and extradited to Italy, where he was convicted of mafia associations and served half of his 2-year sentence. Hamoudi, a Franco-Algerian man who once lived in Montreal, was likewise extradited to Italy, where he received a suspended sentence for mafia associations. Canada refused to extradite either Ranieri or Rizzuto to face trial in Italy. Adriano Iasillo, an anti-mafia prosecutor, stated in an interview with Isabelle Richer of Radio Canada that, without Rizzuto, it would have been impossible for a criminal organization from outside to invest in one of the biggest projects of the century. And it was here, in Italy, that this project of the century was supposed to see the light of day. Sedillo and Noel wrote that a Canadian, Vito Rizzuto, was the chief architect of this massive campaign to plunder Italian government funds, and European community subsides spoke volumes about his reach and influence. This was power that not even the bosses of New York's 5 families had ever dreamed of possessing. In 2005, a 300-kilogram shipment of a total 1,300 kilograms of cocaine, co-organized by Rizzuto family confidant Francesco Del Bolso and West End gang member Richard Griffin, was intercepted in Boucherville, Quebec, by police. After Griffin invested $1.5 million in the purchase and transportation of the cocaine, he demanded $350,000 from the Rizzutos for not taking preventative measures in transporting the drugs. After arguments about the debts, Griffin was riddled with gunfire outside his home in Notre-Dame-de-Grâce on July 12, 2006. On August 30, 2006, 35-year-old Domenico Macri, a Rizzuto family enforcer and protégé of Francesco Del Bolso, was murdered in a drive-by shooting as he waited at a traffic light in his Cadillac car in downtown Montreal. On November 22, 2006, the senior leadership committee of the criminal organization were arrested as part of the 4-year investigation known as Project Colisée. Among the 90 people arrested were Niccolo Rizzuto, Paolo Renda, Rocco Sollecito, Francesco Arcadi, Lorenzo Giordano, and Francesco Del Bolso. During the investigation, the RCMP penetrated the group's inner sanctum by hiding cameras in the Consenza Social Club, where the leaders had business. On September 18, 2008, as a result of the investigation, the committee's 6 members of the family pleaded guilty to possession of proceeds of a crime for the benefit of, the direction of, or in association with a criminal organization. Between September 7-12, 2007, 56-year-old Francesco Frank Vellanosi, an associate of Capo Francesco Arcadi, was found in the trunk of his Volvo car, stabbed to death. On January 15, 2008, Constantine Big Gus Alavizos, an associate of Panepinto before his murder in October 2000, was shot and killed outside of a halfway house in Brampton, Ontario. He was serving 3 years imprisonment since February 2007 for his role in a drug conspiracy. He was accused of stealing $600,000 from the Rizzuto family following Panepinto's murder. A 2001 attempted hit was foiled after Juan Joe Bravo Fernandez gave a gun and ammunition to an undercover police agent. Alavizos was shot in the back and abdomen and was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. On December 4, 2008, 40-year-old Rizzuto family soldier Mario Skinny Marabella was kidnapped at a gas station on Autoroute 440 in Laval, Quebec. He was forced into a minivan, and his car was later found in flames in Montreal. Marabella had several convictions for loan sharking, breaking probation, and extortion. In 1992, he and Giuseppe De Vito robbed a liquor truck. He pleaded guilty to possessing stolen goods and received a 90-day sentence. On January 16, 2009, 37-year-old Sam Fasolo was shot and killed, a convicted heroin and crack cocaine dealer who had close ties to Francesco Accardi. In 2004, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison for his role in a drug trafficking ring that operated out of Italian cafes in St. Leonard and St. Michel. Fasolo was shot several times while driving in North Montreal and died in hospital 2 days later from his wounds. On August 21, 2009, family associate Federico Del Pescio was killed behind La Cantina restaurant in Ahuntsic, 61. On December 28, 2009, Nick Rizzuto Jr., son of Vito Rizzuto, was shot and killed near his car in Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, a borough in Montreal. The killing of Nick Jr., the face of the organization on the street, illustrated the power vacuum within the upper ranks of Montreal organized crime. Since the slaying of Vito Rizzuto's son, the organization suffered other major setbacks. 70-year-old Paolo Renda, the consigliere of the Rizzuto crime family, disappeared on May 20, 2010. A month later, 66-year-old Agostino Contrera, the presumed acting boss who was believed to have taken control of the family, was killed together with his bodyguard, 44-year-old Liborio Sciascia, on June 30, 2010. After 3 decades of relative stability, the face of the city's mafia hierarchy was subject to a major management shuffle. 36-year-old Ennio Bruni, former Rizzuto family enforcer, was shot and killed around 3:15 a.m. outside of Café Bellerose in Vermont, Quebec, on September 29, 2010. Bruni previously managed to escape an assassination attempt on his life on November 24, 2009, after he was shot 3 times in the shoulder and once in the back, shortly after his departure from a restaurant in Laval. On November 10, 2010, Niccolo Rizzuto was killed at his residence in the Cartierville borough of Montreal when a single bullet from a sniper's rifle punched through double-paned glass of the rear patio doors of his mansion. He was 86. His death is believed to have been the final blow against the Rizzuto crime family. You're watching the Everything Network. Calabrese mobsters led by the old Cotroni family were among the suspects for the murders of Rizzuto crime family members. The Rizzutos have dominated organized crime activities in Montreal since its inception, and now their weakened organization is being challenged for control of rackets in the area, most notably the drug trade. An associate of Capo Francesco Accardi and Francesco Del Balso, 44-year-old Antonio Di Salvo, was shot and killed at his home in Rivière-des-Prairies, Quebec, on January 31, 2011. On October 24, 2011, Rizzuto crime family associate turned rival 40-year-old Lorenzo Larry Lopresti, the son of Joe Lopresti, who was gunned down in April 1992, was shot and killed on his ground-floor balcony and pronounced dead at the scene. His murder was confirmed as the 31st homicide in Montreal in 2011. Salvatore Montagna, the acting boss of the Bonanno family until his deportation to Canada in 2009, was believed to be attempting to reorganize both families under his control. However, he was murdered in November 2011. On March 1, 2012, 38-year-old Giuseppe Joe Closure Colapel was shot inside of his parked car in North Montreal and later pronounced dead upon arrival of the hospital. It is believed Colapel worked for Giuseppe De Vito, a former Rizzuto family lieutenant, who was ousted after attempting to overthrow the Rizzuto family in around 2009-2010. Colapel allegedly served as a double agent for Reynald Desjardins and was spying on Salvatore Montagna by mid-2011. On May 4, 2012, 53-year-old Giuseppe Joe Renda was kidnapped and never seen again. Renda met with Antonio Pietranto and Montagna 2 days before the failed assassination attempt on Desjardins on September 16, 2011. Renda allegedly gave Montagna his full support in taking control of the Italian Montreal underworld. Walter Gutierrez, a money launderer for the Rizzuto family, was shot to death in West Montreal on July 16, 2012. Vito Rizzuto was released from prison on October 5, 2012. On November 5, 2012, Rizzuto family confidant turned rival 70-year-old Giuseppe Smiling Joe Di Mauro was executed by a hitman waiting outside his home in Blainville, Quebec. Di Mauro allegedly attended the election of Philippe Rastelli as the Bonanno family boss in 1973 with Desjardins and Paolo Violi. It also noted that he was the brother-in-law of Desjardins. On December 8, 2012, Rizzuto family lieutenant 50-year-old Emilio Cordileone was gunned down in a Huntsic near his parked car. His murder was verified as Montreal's 33rd homicide in 2012. Cordileone's murder was possibly the result of his association with Giuseppe De Vito and the Cotroni crime family. On May 8, 2013, 57-year-old Juan Joe Bravo Fernandez and his associate 36-year-old Fernando Pimentel, considered neutral in the Rizzuto war, were both found murdered in a garbage dump in Casteldaccia, Palermo. His body was burnt and riddled with over 30 bullets. His associate allegedly arrived in Sicily in March. Law enforcement considered the hit to be ordered by Vito Rizzuto. Bravo was deported from Canada to Sicily in 2012. Giuseppe Carboni, Pietro and Salvatore Scaduto were convicted for the April 9th murder. Carbone led the police to the whereabouts in May. He became a cooperating witness and was sentenced to 16 years in prison. On July 8, 2013, 46-year-old Giuseppe De Vito, ally of Desjardins, was fatally poisoned in his cell at Donnacona Federal Penitentiary. De Vito was targeted by law enforcement in 2006 as part of Operation Colosseum. He was serving a 15-year prison sentence for conspiracy to import cocaine and gangsterism charges following his conviction in 2010. His murder is believed to be orchestrated by Vito Rizzuto. On July 12, 2013, 41-year-old Salvatore Calotti was shot in the head and killed while driving in Vaughan, Ontario. His associate, 35-year-old Jimmy Chusek, was shot in the chest and stomach. The killing of Calotti is believed to be revenge for the murder of Vito Rizzuto associate Gaetano Panepinto in October 2000 and Niccolo Rizzuto Sr. in November 2010. It is noted he also had ties to the Ndrangheta organization in Canada. On November 10, 2013, 67-year-old Moreno, the Turkey Gallo, a once influential member of the crime family, was killed by a gunman inside an Italian restaurant in the Mexican city of Acapulco. He had lived in Canada throughout the 1950s, but was deported in January 2013 after the Canadian government formally accused him of murder and organized crime charges. The murder of Gallo is believed to have marked the 3-year anniversary of the murder of Niccolo Rizzuto Sr. on November 10, 2010. It is suspected Gallo was killed as a consequence of aligning with Desjardins and attempting to overthrow the Rizzuto family around 2009. 5 days before the death of Rizzuto, on December 18, 2013, 54-year-old Roger Valaquette Jr., a loan shark and Reynold Desjardins' ally, who also had ties to Joe Di Mauro, was gunned down in the parking lot of a restaurant in Laval. Vito Rizzuto died of natural causes on December 23, 2013. After his release from prison, Rizzuto had been on a revenge campaign which the Rizzuto crime family continued after his death. Several members and associates of the Cotroni family were murdered as a result. In April 2014, Carmine Vidusi was shot to death outside a cafe. It is believed he was hustling on the Rizzuto's turf following Vito's death. On August 1, 2014, 46-year-old Decam Joseph, leader of the Haitian-based street gang, the 67s, was shot multiple times in the upper body on the streets of Saint-Michel, Montreal, and was pronounced dead when paramedics arrived. Sources claimed his murder was retribution for his involvement in the murder of Nick Rizzuto Jr. in December 2009, the son of Vito Rizzuto. The 67 gang formed in the Saint-Michel district of Montreal, Quebec, Canada in the late 1980s and are associated with the Crips gang. Police believe Joseph drove the getaway car in the Rizzuto murder. It is alleged the Rizzuto family offered $200,000 for the death of Joseph. His boutique shop was also shot up. Joseph managed to flee, however his bodyguard and associate, 27-year-old Peter Christopoulos, and the store manager, 60-year-old Jan Gaston, were killed. He was arrested on March 19th on charges of assault and the possession of a firearm silencer. In November of 2015, Vito Rizzuto's son, Leonardo Rizzuto, along with Rocco Sollecito's son, Stefano Sollecito, believed to be the heads of the mafia in Montreal, were arrested along with more than 40 other people, and were charged with taking part in a conspiracy to traffic in drugs between January 1, 2013 and November 16, 2015. They were also charged with committing a crime for the benefit of, at the direction of, or in association with, a criminal organization. As part of the same operation, the police charged Maurice Boucher with ordering the failed assassination plot on Desjardins from his prison. On March 1, 2016, 52-year-old Lorenzo "Skunk" Giordano, a Rizzuto lieutenant and confidant who had expressed wishes to become the next boss of the Rizzuto family, was shot to death in a Chomedey, Quebec parking lot. On May 27, 2016, 67-year-old Rocco Sollecito was shot to death while driving in Laval. Sollecito was an underboss of the family, and his death was believed to be part of a dismantling of the older generation of the family. Semi-retired, Rizzuto family member, 72-year-old Angelo D'Onofrio, was shot several times at close range. On June 2, 2016, inside of Café Sinatra, by a young hitman. A few months later, on October 15, 2016, 65-year-old Vincenzo Spagnuolo, considered formerly as a mediator, messenger and advisor to Vito Rizzuto, was shot multiple times at his home in Vimont, Quebec, and pronounced dead. Spagnuolo was close to the Sicilian faction of the family following Rizzuto's death in 2013. In December 2016, Desjardins received a 14-year prison sentence, including time served, for connection to the murder of Salvatore Montagna in November 2011. On January 30, 2017, 39-year-old Anastasios Leventis, a former computer technician and enforcer associated with the Rizzuto crime family, was shot to death in Toronto. 2 firearms were recovered close to the scene of the homicide. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges and marijuana smuggling in 2009 as part of Project Cancun, and was sentenced to 6 months in prison. A court document issued in 2009 considered Leventis the main marijuana supplier in the operation. On August 17, 2017, 45-year-old Antonio de Blasio, a Rizzuto family soldier and Sollecito crew member, was gunned down outside his son's football practice in St. Leonard. He was shot several times in the upper body. De Blasio's murder was confirmed as Montreal's 15th homicide in 2017. Jacques Desjardins, brother of Reynald, disappeared on November 3, 2017, and is presumed. On February 3, 2018, 33-year-old Daniele Ranieri was found in a ditch in Cancun, Mexico. He was shot twice in the back of the head. Law enforcement alleged Ranieri took over the Toronto crew on behalf of the Rizzuto crime family following the April 2013 murder of Joe Bravo. Ranieri fled to Mexico in 2015 following an indictment on extortion charges issued by the York Regional Police. He previously served 3 prison stints for robbery, assault, bookmaking, and firearm offences. On February 19, 2018, Leonardo Rizzuto and Stefano Sollecito were released from prison, since their November 2015 arrest and acquitted of charges of gangsterism and conspiracy to traffic cocaine. The wiretap evidence that was gathered by a joint police task force in 2015 was excluded as a violation of the constitutional right to solicitor-client privilege. Rizzuto's death paved the way for upheaval in the underworld. There's a power struggle left from the vacuum from Rizzuto. On October 17, 2019, Jonathan Massari, Domenico Scarfo, Guy Dion, and Marie-José Vio were arrested and charged with planning and executing the murders of Solicito and Giordano. With the testimonies of Dion and Vio, Scarfo was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder of both Solicito and Giordano, and sentenced to 25 years in prison on April 11, 2022. And Massari pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder of both Solicito and Giordano, and sentenced to 25 years in prison. The power vacuum after Rizzuto's death was particularly apparent to mobsters from the area of Hamilton, Ontario. Angelo Musitano, boss of the city's Musitano crime family, was killed in May 2017. In April 2019, his uncle Tony Musitano died of natural causes, leaving nephew Pasquale, Pat Musitano, as the last of the dynasty. Those deaths cost protection in a world where he had a growing number of enemies, according to journalist Peter Edwards. The enemies included criminal groups in Hamilton, Buffalo, Montreal, and elsewhere, including the Lupino and Papalia crime gang. Shortly after Angelo's murder, Pat Musitano's home was sprayed with bullets, and shortly after Tony's death, in April 2019, Pat was shot but survived. At that time, CBC News discussed other mob hits and stated that the surge in violence appeared to have commenced after Vito Rizzuto's death. The Musitano family was aligned with the Rizzuto family, which offered protection. In July 2020, Pat Musitano was killed as a result of this alliance. On November 10, 2021, Serafino Olivero, an independent money launderer closely connected to the Rizzuto organization, survived a drive-by assassination attempt in Montreal's Rivière des Prairies neighborhood. Olivero had been fined $75,000 by Revenu Quebec in 2018 for producing false tax returns. It is possible that Olivero had fallen from the good graces of the Rizzuto family and was targeted as a result. On February 9, 2022, 46-year-old Domenico Macri was murdered in his garage in the La Salle neighborhood of Montreal during a drive-by shooting. Macri was the owner of a local sports bar and is believed to have been involved in the illegal sports betting business and had connections to the Italian mafia in Montreal and the West End gang. On March 15, 2023, Leonardo Rizzuto was shot at 6 times while driving on Autoroute 440 in Laval, escaping with minor injury. In June 2023, 2 men were charged with attempted murder of Rizzuto. On June 5, 2023, 53-year-old Francesco Del Balso, a longtime Rizzuto confidant, was gunned down in Dorval.